Before I actually start, I want to tell you a short story, which is also my thank you mom moment, because it was a truly formative and fascinating experience for me. Once upon a time, in the early 80s, when I was 7 or 8 years old, my mother took me to her place of work to show the latest technological fad, computers. We got into a room which looked roughly like this, but without funky chairs, without colored walls, overall much darker and gloomier space. I was moderately excited by the room-sized machines, by these big floppy disks, but not too excited. But everything changed when one of the monitors turned up, and I saw the following prompt. It was a clone of Hammurabi, one of the first ever computer games originally developed back in the 60s. And the purpose of the game was to rule a country, no less, using few available resources like population, grain, land, and money against natural disasters like time, wars, hunger, and similar. I could not remember, or I can still remember now, how I spent the next few hours, how many bushels of grain I sold, how many people got fed. All I remembered is the power at my fingertips. This feeling of something great, this experience, which I wanted to do again and again and again. Now, here you see the screenshot from the Hammurabi game, and next to it, one of the ads of our campaign. As you can see easily, there is no quantum leap from one to another. And you have all the right to ask me, what took me roughly 35 years to come up with a campaign which looks like this? Well, the honest and simple answer would be, I don't know. I get easily distracted, and after discovering the computers, I discovered many other great things like rock and roll, alcohol, and advertising, and many others which all contributed to the shameful fact that as of now, not a year ago, but as of now, I can't even code the hello world beat in any language but English. So hello world, hello Tartu, but I know what a variable is, and I have some notion of syntax, because after all, even advertising writers should know their commas from semicolons and what syntax is, and so on. Luckily, we've had in our team a person or two who knew much more than me. And now I want to ask you to raise hands, those of you who are professional developers or have some relevant professional development experience, please. Quite a lot, thank you. The reason I asked that, because rarely admin and adwomen have the chance to talk about their campaign with the audience the campaign is intended for. The audience which would get the message or the joke or both contained in the ad. So it's going to be a focus group of sorts, or error review session. On the other hand, in all cases, an advertising campaign is being presented to the decision makers from agency side and from client side at the moment in time when it's not actually happening yet. So the campaign is ready in terms of sketches, high fidelity prototypes and whatnot. And then agencies try to persuade and promise to the client that it will work as intended. And that's where the biggest skill of the agencies come into play. It's repeating the mantra, it will work and do like this. So now we have the case of the campaign which actually worked. So it worked. Let me take you through it. Last autumn, Work in Estonia was planning to run a major coding challenge recruitment campaign. They approached us, the Tank agency, to come up with an advertising campaign, online advertising campaign which would drive users, which would drive highly skilled IT professionals from 8 European countries to the campaign site, where they would get the chance to pass coding challenges from the leading Estonian high-tech companies. In case of successful completion, a candidate would have enjoyed faster review process and other perks. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong button. As I mentioned already, there are many similarities between UX development process and advertising development process. Just like many of you here we need to get very deep into the context of how interaction takes place, what helps user to engage, what actually makes him to disengage from the campaign advertising materials. So are the processes. So both processes, as UX and advertising, they're highly iterative, and sometimes they yield nice results. So we started with a strategy which was pretty straightforward. In order to engage those highly skilled IT professionals, we needed to talk to them in their own language. We believed that we needed to emphasize their specialness, but see them not just as professionals, but as human beings with real pains, real stresses, real joys. We deep dived into research. We started interviewing people. We started observing those developers who were available at the hand's reach or something. We started mining online for all kinds of available data. And the biggest help at this stage wrong device. The biggest help at this stage came from Stack Overflow annual developers survey, run amongst more than 65,000 developers from more than 200 countries. And there were some critical findings which really helped us. Like every third developer is somewhat unsatisfied with his or her current job, but only 15% of them are actively looking for a job. At the same time, 3 out of 4 developers are interested in hearing about new job opportunities. And also it comes as no surprise that the main assessment factor for a new job consideration for a professional developer would be opportunities for professional development. Jokes aside, we validated some of our assumptions and we were ready to proceed with the creative development. One of the interesting things we found out that there are many words and expressions from ordinary language which developers use in their own way. We believe that these usages can be transformed into ads which would be hopefully funny and thus memorable, thus increasing the engagement potential of the campaign. We quite liked the approach. We quite liked what we achieved. It looked funky, it looked funny to us. But then the further we thought about it, the more we started to feel that this looks like a case of cultural imperialism and appropriation. Basically, none of us, or nearly none of us, could tell the difference between patching and punching, let alone most of other terms we were going to use in the campaign. I personally read of what it means to carry a function like 5 or 6 times last time yesterday, and please don't ask me to explain in my words what does it mean. I can explain what cultural imperialism is. This man comes for a holiday vacation. He sees this beautiful, funny-looking African mask, which he buys immediately, and then for the next 20 years he enjoys. He never misses a party without wearing his mask. He enjoys himself, everyone enjoys his mask, only to find out 20 years later that it is a funeral mask. So we didn't really want our campaign to be considered such, so we continued to think further. However, we took one important ingredient from here, and basically this ingredient is slightly irreverent, slightly challenging tone of the messages. As some time passed by, we started to think that maybe we are overthinking the whole visual look of the campaign. But maybe we should be more focused not on illustrating the work, but rather show the work itself. It suddenly occurred to us that maybe something like a screenshot or something which looks like a Visual Studio or Notepad++ or something, you name it, would work as a perfect illustration of the fact that this is a job-related ad. Then we came up with the following ad. It says self-actualization function work in Estonia. We quite liked it. It had this irreverence. It clearly said this is job-related for those special people. It had this in your face, we are talking to you kind of vibe, but it lacked interactivity, and it has some emotional challenge to it, but none of mental challenge whatsoever. So we continued to think, and we came up with the following elements for the ads. So we decided that all ads should be using the same color scheme, replicating coder's working environment. We need to have a headline with a double meaning, preferably. Double meaning would be in ordinary English and in developer's English, and the code snippet, written to feel, along with the headline and the button, as if the coder's career is talking to him or to her directly. So we came up with the following 4 main banners. We quite liked them. There was a pun, there was a small mystery, there was a small challenge, there was everything but one nearly fatal flaw. We started to think about decision makers on both sides, and they understood that they may find this too restrained, too minimalistic, too boring, in short, no go. So we reached out to several developers we knew personally and several developers we did not, asking them to review and comment on our ads without giving any extra details. What is this for and what is this about? And we got a range of interesting feedback. Some of it was very promising and encouraging for us. Some of it was totally other way around. Some were negative comments, but in fact they were indicating we are proceeding right. Let me take you through some of them. So basically we had a lot of comments on the syntax, again, on the misplaced colons and semicolons, commas and semicolons and whatnot. And basically we suddenly understood, apart from the fact that people are paying attention to the nuances of our ads, but we also understood that there are at least 2 types of developers work in Estonia and employers may get interested in. The first type are the developers who have this fighting spirit, who are ready for any challenge whenever they see one. The other type are those people, those developers who have this natural urge to fix something whenever they see something which is in need of fixing. It was obvious to us that both types of developers were needed for the campaign and for bigger thing. Well, the fact that someone, basically the commenter, suggests to improve the code so it becomes even more funnier this way. And for us, the fact that someone is joking on top of our joke was a very welcoming sign, because in today's hyper-connected world, when a person likes an online joke, he usually shares it with his friends and friends of his friends and so on, thus expanding the reach of the campaign. Well, basically, the answer to this is very simple. The return from your years is skills and missing. Unfortunately, there was 1 or 2 respondents who did not get the joke at all, and we had to kill this particular execution because we wanted all of the main ads to be more or less totally and instantly understandable by more or less every developer exposed to the ad. Time is running out. Finally, this ad. Well, 2 types of responses we got there. And we believe that in the first case, basically, if you don't know, these are just 3 words, work in Estonia, in hex code. And basically, one respondent suggested that he would take a lot of time to decode this. And obviously, for us, this person was not ready to work in Estonia because he was too lazy. While the second type suggested he would not click through an ad that says nothing about its purpose. And again, we believe that no go to work in Estonia, because to work in Estonia, one needs to be curious and adventurous and inquisitive. So now we've validated what we've had, and we've had the set of guidelines for ourselves. We've had a distinctive visual style, we had a certain messaging style, we had the code pieces finalized, we had the buttons. Forgot to mention one thing, we've had even some UI and UX comments. Like one commenter suggested that we need to float the button to the left, and we need to change the shade of blue from pure blue to Tron-like shade of blue. We did neither. Sorry, UX community, we disregarded your suggestion. Maybe it would have been even more successful that way. So we've had everything to continue developing the campaign materials, from the 4 main banners to the landing page design and sub-pages. And we wanted the mechanics of the campaign to be as simple and as straightforward as possible. Basically, when a person would click one of the 4 main banners, he or she would get to the landing page where we continued our verbal manipulations, and would be tasked with a warm-up test, which was actually a code from the banner clicked, rolled over, and become editable. So if a person passed this test, he or she would get to the employee test page. Otherwise, he or she would be given another attempt to try a warm-up exercise, or suggested to go straight to the job listing section, review what's available, submit his application, and be reviewed, but in much slower ordinary time and without any other perks. The campaign proved to be a success. I'd like to think that a part of this success can be explained by nice, stimulating, and entertaining experience users were getting from our campaign. In terms of numbers, over 200 unique users engaged with the campaign and clicked the banners. The click-through rate was really low, lower than average for all countries involved. A very low bounce rate for the landing page, on average less than 20%, and 875 candidate resumes were registered with employers. We also used so-called remarketing ads. Remarketing ads are those ads which were shown to the users who clicked one of the 4 original banners, got to the landing page, passed the warm-up test, but then for some reason dropped off. So they were shown these two things, and these 2 banners also boasted a decent number of clicks, roughly 7,000 of them, and I'd like to think that that can be explained by the fact that those users just wanted to repeat their campaign user experience again and again. I hope you still have some questions left, but I won't be alone to face them. Please let me welcome on the stage an esteemed member of our campaign team, Kaisatrin Kosinkranius from Work in Estonia initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei. Let's have a round of questions now. So since I have the microphone, I get to do whatever I want, which is to ask the first question also. So you pointed out the similarities that ad work and UX work have, and this is a great example of another important principle, which is iterations, right? You did many cycles of this. So my question about that is, how do you actually test this? Do you just, kind of look at yourself this with your expert colleagues, or do you actually bring people to your office to test them, or do you do it somehow online? Which method did you find the most valuable?
Well, it strongly depends on the amount of time you have. So if it's, well, I can more talk about my experience in Russia. If you have an advertiser like Danone, and they're planning their campaigns, let's say 1 year in advance. So they have this time to, sometimes they test the low fidelity prototypes, there's sketches, then they test the animatics, which are kind of high fidelity prototypes, then they test the short commercial. And sometimes if a short commercial does not test too well, it just gets binned. In some other cases, like when you have a limited amount of time, you would do all kinds of things, like you can do the McDonald's testing, like you go to McDonald's and ask people what they think without telling your actual purpose. So you can ask your colleagues, or you can go to accountant's office and ask them, because usually, or often, more often than not, accountants are those people who act as a litmus paper. If they don't like it, if you're talking about a campaign which is aimed at the general public, at a larger stratus of general public, then if accountants don't get it, then it is likely that general public would not get it too.
So is it similar to mom test? Moms and accountants are kind of the same?
Well, moms are sympathetic, so
okay, true. Moms are
even someone else's moms are sympathetic.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the audience with a catch box. Who would like to ask Sergei something? There you go. There's one there.
Bingo.
Also, just a reminder, just introduce yourself briefly also.
So, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Timur, and I'm a Java developer at Playtech. So the question is, you mentioned that when initially you planned to do that advertisement, you thought that you need to make it funny, or somewhat funny. And when I think about my own experience and the advertisement that catched my eye, they all are kind of funny. Is it kind of a rule that advertisement should be funny, or there are some exclusions of that rule? Thank you.
It's a good question. Well, the rule rather dictates that advertising should be relevant and memorable. If it's relevant and funny, then it's destined to become memorable. If it's irrelevant, like totally irrelevant, but really, really funny, but then it will still become memorable and effective. Usually, people in the industry from both sides don't take risks and don't make things which are like very funny. People play it safe in most of the cases, whatever industry they belong to. And in many cases, depending on the time frame, depending on your own seat, depending on many things, people don't want to take extra risk. Like taking all kinds of decisions in the office constitutes a huge risk, right? You know it yourself.
And I would also like to add that basically that was like being funny or being informal was also one thing that we want to look like as like work in Estonia, as we're promoting working in Estonia. We don't want to look like very corporate, very boring, very high hierarchies and very like a lot of rules. So that's why also like this fun, being more funny and being more relaxed approach was a good fit.
We didn't want to look like this cold, desolate place we are. That was a joke.
All right, more questions? Anybody? Well, if not, then I'm going to ask just a client representative also, or just your experience of working with Tank through this. Anything else you would like to point out or bring out?
From a client perspective, it's really good that in the team we had Sergei. So it's like someone who is already has been a person who has relocated to Estonia. Like I'm sure that you already yourself you observed other places as well, and Estonia wasn't probably your first option, or because usually Estonia is like number 50 option.
Been my only option, but it was my first and only choice. So, well, I have Moscow still as a choice.
So yeah, it was very good to have someone in the team who is from abroad.
Target group.
Yeah, like people from different countries and from different backgrounds in a team make a good team.
Okay, last call. Anybody? To Sergei? If not, then let's thank Sergei.
Thank you.